Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this session about top 10 things people mess up with Canvas Power Apps. Uh, these are things that I have been messing up when I started with Canvas apps and things I have seen my colleagues and people from the customer side, they are being struggling when they start this journey. First, I'd like to thank all our sponsors today, ScriptRunner, DT Global, Proximo 3, Redspire, Agilysys, and Hitachi Solutions. Thank you. And shortly about myself, my name is Timo Pertilä. I work here in Helsinki as a Power Platform consultant. I am a Microsoft MVP in business applications area, and I have been working with Canvas Power Apps and Cloudflow since 2016. So from the very beginning of the story of those tools. But let's start, and the first thing people are messing up with Canvas apps is that they are actually not messing up at all. So you might have done some flows, and they are pretty easy to start with, and then you are moving to the Power Apps and notice that okay, this learning curve is a little bit higher, so you decide to pass. So I don't want to learn this one, but please try, because there's thousands of people who have been learned to build apps by themselves with using Power Apps, and you can do it also. So if you have some idea, for example, some mobile application, simple one, and you know that this is something that can be built with Power Apps, then just try to build that, or ask your colleague to build it for you. Because at the end, those non-existing applications, they don't have any business value. So if you don't build that, it have no value. It's simple like that. Now this was kind of motivation part of the session, and now we can move on to the actual pain points on Canvas apps when you start to build those. And the first one, the biggest one, I think, is the delegation. So when you start to build your application, you see these yellow triangles at some point of time, and those yellow triangles tells you that you have delegation issue in your app, and when you click that one, you see the actual formula, what is causing the delegation, and you see the part of the formula here underlined with the blue line. This part of the formula is now causing the delegation, and if you mouse over that one, you see the message that there is delegation warning. The highlighted part of this formula might not work correctly with column ID on large data sets. And the trickiest part is this one. It might not work correctly. And what I see when people are building these apps, that they just ignore this message, because in many cases your application is working. It seems to be working fine, even there is those delegation issues. So people just don't care. But they should, because these delegation issues can cause that your application seems to be running okay, but actually it doesn't run okay at all anymore. And first thing we need to do is to understand what this delegation actually is, and let's go through by this simple example. Here I have my Canvas Power Apps. It shows stores located all over the place, and all these items are actually stored here in one big SharePoint list. There's 50,000 items stored in that SharePoint list, and now we like to show here in our application all the stores that are located in Helsinki. So what we do filter query against the SharePoint, our data source, and we are filtering all the stores that location have value Helsinki. And this query can be delegated to the SharePoint. It means that the SharePoint do all the filtering, all the work. And after that, SharePoint returns all 5001 stores that are located in Helsinki, and we can do in our Power Apps, we can do whatever we like with these 5001 item. Everything is fine. But now let's do this same thing a little bit differently. Instead of filter query, we do search. So now we are searching all the stores that location column has value Helsinki. Seems to be very, very similar. But the search query cannot be delegated to the SharePoint, and now we get the yellow triangle. We have delegation issue, and because this can't be delegated to the SharePoint, it means that actually the SharePoint, our data source, it do nothing. It just returns 500 first item from that big list to our Power Apps, and the Power Apps do the search. All the stores that are located in Helsinki, and it's using these 500 items. And now we see what's the problem. We know there's actually 5001 stores located in Helsinki, but now we are doing search only 500 of those 50,000 and searching those stores inside of that bunch. And it might be that we don't find any stores located in Helsinki, but we know for sure that we don't get all the 5,000 items because we are dealing with the 500 item. You can raise this limit, this 500 limit to 2,000, but the 2,000 is the absolute maximum. And because of that, when you get those delegation warnings, you need to understand how many items you are dealing with now and in the future. If you are dealing only, 50, 100 items, it's okay. But if there will be more than 500 items at some point of time, you need to figure out how you get rid of those delegation issues. Next thing are the environments. Usually, when I meet customer and we start to look what they have done with the Power Platform, I noticed that the customer has only one environment, the default environment, and everything is done in default environment. And why that's a little bit problematic is that you have to be careful with your default environment because default environment is kind of special environment. I call it Wild Wild West environment because every user in your tenant has maker permissions on default environment. Everybody can build Power Apps and flows in default environment. So is that kind of environment you like to put your production applications also? No. And for that reason, I suggest that you keep that default environment as a Wild Wild West environment. You don't support those applications at all. Everybody can build those applications and they are by their own, but you don't support those. You should make some DLP policy on your default environment just to restrict some basic social media or Google or SQL connectors on that environment to make it a little bit safer. And you allow that people can build kind of personal application solutions in default environment. And for that reason, it might be wise to rename the default environment as a personal environment or personal productive environment, because default it kind of people don't understand what is the purpose of the default environment. And besides that default environment, you should have at least one production environment. This is kind of the simplest setup of environments. Many customers, organizations, they have several production environments, they have test and dev environments and so on, but this is the simplest one. And with that one production environment, this is kind of managed environment. You control who can build applications on that environment, who can deploy applications to that environment, and so on. So you can have kind of approved app makers for that environment. There's also only limited amount of applications on that environment, so you can easily provide support for the end users or the maker or the both on that environment. You can allow a little bit wider set of connectors on that environment, and this is the place where applications for teams and units and organization level uses is living. So that's short story about environments. Please be careful if you have only default environment. Next one is renaming the controls. And yeah, people are usually super lazy. I am super lazy. And they just build the applications and they don't care about how to name all the controls they have been used. But maybe they should. And you don't have to actually figure out naming conventions by yourself. Microsoft have provided pretty decent naming convention on that white paper that is published in Power Apps blog. But why you should rename your control? Imagine that you have built some applications and you have to make change after 6 months or a year. When you build the application, everything is clear, of course, but it might be easy to understand after the time goes that what these controls are actually doing here. And if you spend some time to rename those, you get this one, and this is, after a while, it's much more easier to understand what's happening here than here. And let's look this in practice also. Here I have my example application, and if you are super lazy, you should do at least these, rename these galleries, and now I have here, I have static header. These elements, they are doing nothing, they are just placeholders for this table. I am not referring to them, and there is no any actions. I cannot sort these columns or filter or anything. This kind of noise in this application, and what I can do, I can just group them and give these groups a meaningful name, like gallery header. And now this is much more cleaner. But there is one scenario that you have to rename your controls with meaningful names, and that is when you actually refer to those controls in your formulas. Like here, I have this approval required toggle here, and the formula is like this. This is true, this toggle button is true when value of data card value 99 is greater than 5,000. And we don't have any idea what this means. Of course, when I hit this, I see that this is referring here, but it's much more readable if you rename these controls you are referring. So this one should be order total value. And now, when I look this one, I see immediately what is the logic behind that control. Okay, and next one is the formula editor, and this more like tips and tricks for you, not something people are messing up. But I saw that when people are starting with Power Apps, they don't use the formula bar or formula editor as efficient than they could. And let's deep dive a little bit on that control. And now I'm meaning with formula bar is this one here, where usually where all the magic happens. So when I have this button here, I click that one. The first thing is that this onSelect property is the interesting one in many cases with the buttons. And I can open this formula bar, and even better, I can resize that one. And usually I work like this. But you can also navigate to this formula bar in different property very efficiently by using this panel here in the right side. So I have activated this button. If I like to look what is the visible formula, I just hit that one and it opens it here. I can look colors, and even I can look top margins, bottom margins, left margins, and so on. So you can navigate by using this one. Also, you see here, when this is grayed out, you see that this display mode actually don't have constant value. It has some formula behind that. And this is the next trick I like to show, that you can always highlight here some part of formula and you see the actual value here. You can, if I zoom it a little bit, you can also highlight this part and you see that, okay, this is returning true, and you can highlight the whole thing and you see that this formula is actually returning display mode edit. And this is very useful when you are debugging your app. You have some bug there and you don't actually see what's is in which place it's going wrong. Then you can just highlight and look step by step your formulas and see where where there is logical error in your code. Then next one is that you can actually, let's look where I have some, like here I have error, and these errors you can always look what is the error message. So, and you should look. Now we noticed that there's some character missing, and I know that actually here it shows red mark here, and I know that this one is missing. And the one thing people don't know, that you can actually, when you write this code here, you can use this auto formatting. And now Power Apps formats the formula for you nicely. And if you have very long formulas here, then it might be too wide. In that case, I formulate by myself. But in most of the cases, this auto format is very handy. And I use it also in that way that, for example, here I have my up on start code. Whenever I open any formula bar, the first thing I look is that one. Are these enabled or disabled? Because now these are disabled, so I know for sure that there has to be some error in my code, because it can't some error, and because it can't, the tool itself can't do the auto formatting. And now I know again that I have been forgetting this last character, and now the code is okay and I can do the formatting. So I always look these when I open any part of formula, because it tells me immediately if there's any syntax error in your code. One thing that is useful are these colors. So these formulas are also color coded. So all the formulas are presented in blue. Data sources, collections, and variables are with green, and the values like strings and numbers here are shown as red. And this color coding can also be handy in some scenarios, like here. Here I have a simple formula. I have this demo orders data source, and then I have collections for new orders, and I like to patch each item from that collection to this demo orders data source. And if we look this one, it looks pretty okay, but for some reason it's all red, so there is some mystical error in my code. But when we look this a little bit more careful, we notice that for some reason these demo orders here, it's our data source, but it's not shown as green as here. So this is actually now referring to some other object than our data source. And the reason is here. Here in our collection, we have inside our collection column that has exactly the same name than our data source. And now this one here is actually referring to our column, not to the data source. And for these scenarios, we have this syntax in Power Apps what we can use. And with this one, you can force these to refer to the global level object. And this, in this scenario, it's our data source. And now it's working fine. And this kind of bugs, it's very easy to find when you look a little bit about those colors. Okay, next one is licensing. And everybody hates this topic, but when you are building solutions with any of the Power Platform tools, you should have some sort of understanding about the licensing model. Because I have seen, for example, cases that the customer has asked from the supplier that please build Power Apps for that scenario, and please make sure that we can use that solution with our Office 365 licenses. We don't, there's 5,000 users and we don't want to pay any Power Apps plans for those users. And then people in the supplier side, they build the application and they deploy it. And I came here on there and open up the Canvas app. And first thing I see is that, okay, you have used these premium connectors. And it means that every user has to have those Power Apps per user plans. And too bad, it actually, in many cases, this information is there if you just find and read it. But people are lazy. They see there's some mystical diamond here, but they don't figure out or even read what is these texts here. So, and these are terrible situations for the customer side. They have paid for the solution, and after that they figure out that there will be licensing issues with that one. So for that reason, please have some basic understanding how these licensing stuff works, what you can do with the Office license, when you need premium license, and when you can use, for example, database for Teams. It makes your and your customer life much more easier. Next one is the mobile usage. And this is important if you are building Power Apps that are used by mobile phones. It's super nice tool for build applications for the mobiles. But in many organizations, the end user might have pretty old phones. They have smartphones, but they are 4 years old, and they are not only old, but they are also lower end models. So the cheaper one. And when you build your mobile Power Apps and you test it with your own brand new iPhone and it working smoothly, it doesn't mean that it works also smoothly with those 5-year-old phones the customer user have. So if you are building Power Apps that are used by mobile phones, first thing you have to do is that figure out what kind of phones the end user have and get one of those phones for yourself. And during the implementation phase, you should all the time test your Power Apps with that old phone. Then you notice if it starts to work slowly. Because it might be if you have several screens, you have hundreds of controls and all kind of cool images there. It might be that those old mobile phones run out of the memory with your phone, with your Power Apps, and then you are in trouble. Next thing people are messing up with the Power Apps is that they are copy pasting the code everywhere. And let's look this one also using this example here. Here I have same form we saw look earlier, and when I have order value greater than 5,000, then approval is turned on, and then this approval email field appears. And now we like to do change that this description field also appear only when order value is greater than 5,000. And what people are usually doing, they look here, what's the logic behind of this one? Okay, this is turned true when this order value is greater than 5,000, and they copy paste it here to our description field and use that same formula here in visible property. And now, yes, this is working properly, but what we just do, we had our business logic in one place, but now we have the same logic in two places. And from the maintenance point of view, this is horrible. But what you should do, what people don't usually know, that you can refer from any control, you can refer to other controls. So instead of copying this code, we can just use here the value of this approval. So this is visible if this value is true. Now we just refer the end result of our business logic that is located here. And this works now just like it should be, but our business logic is only in one place. And what we have been waiting for is kind of some kind of functions where we can encapsulate our business logic, and it seems to be that kind of feature is coming during these marks, and this would be super. Next thing I like to talk about is form mode. So when people start to build Power Apps, the one thing they will hit is that in some point of time they have forms, and the forms start to behave strange way. And the key thing there usually, or the reason for the misbehaving usually is the form mode. Here I have my screen. I have a gallery of orders, and when I click edit here, I have form here that I can use to edit those orders, like this one. And I can also create new orders, like new order, blah, blah, blah. And I save it. And what happens now? It seems that I get some, instead of my order I just added, I get some random order here. And why that happened? It happens because the basic logic of the form has two key mode. It can be in edit mode or in new mode. And in edit mode, it edits item from the data source. It has been connected. It gets edit items that are placed on the item property. And for example here, when I hit the edit button here, I put this item here to that var selected item variable that is used here in our form item. And when you are in new mode, like we are here, when I click this new, I force the form in new form mode. Then it just ignore that item property. But what happens when I save the form? After the save, that form moves from the new mode to the edit mode. And of course, in edit mode, it starts to edit this item here. And it actually, the last item I have been selected from the gallery. So it works like it should be, but people usually don't know this movement from the new to the edit. And this is a very simple example, but imagine that you have several forms in your screen, and they have some connections between. Then it's very easy to build situation that some of your forms is in wrong mode, or in mode that you didn't accept it. And the easiest way to figure out what's happening here is that I usually put in the screen this kind of label for each form that tells me that in which state these forms are. And then I debugged my application and look what's happening. That is there some form in my screen that changes the form mode, or is it in the mode that it shouldn't be in that moment of time? You might have forget to change the mode here or something else. But usually when the forms start to behave weird, the reason is the form mode. And how you can fix this kind of what I just show you, this kind of situation, is that after the save, you can update this var selected item to point this just added item. and it can be done like here. You just refer the last submitted item of that form. And the last thing people are messing up is that they forget that this Power Platform is evolving, and it's evolving very fast. It means, for example, that if somebody asks from me last summer that I have this kind of requirement, can I build this by using this tool? And I do some homework, and after that I tell the customer that, oh, too bad, this can't be done with Power Apps. And then today, some other customer asked me the very same question. I just can't to say to the customer that it can't be done with these tools, because it might be that it can. There has been new features, or existing features have been improved so that it actually is now possible. So with Power Platform, you need to keep up your knowledge, not all the time, but now and then, so that you don't end up to build apps kind of old or inefficient way. Yeah, it might feel that it's kind of how I say it, not so interesting or motivating thing to do, to learn all the time. But for other people, it's kind of the most interesting way of working, that you can learn every day. You can learn new stuff. But then it's time for the summary. What we have just went through. So my top 10 mistakes with Canvas Power Apps is: first one is that you skip the whole Power Apps. This is too hard for me. Somebody else can do this. Next one is that you don't understand the delegation, because when you mess up with the delegation, you can actually do big mistakes. Third one is that you place all your apps in default environment. If your organization has only default environment, then you can raise your hand and ask, is it possible to have some proper place where we can put these real applications, because we don't want to put those on default environment. Number 4, you are not renaming any of your controls. You should rename them all, but at least those ones that you are referring inside your application. Number 5, you are not using the formula editor very efficiently. Number 6, you have no idea at all about the Power Platform licensing. You don't have to be a licensing expert, but you have to understand the basics. Number 7, you are building too heavy apps for too old phones. Number 8, you are copy-pasting the code all over the place. Number 9, you are not understanding the form mode. And 10, you are not following the change on the platform and the new features. And that was my presentation today. Thank you for all for attending, and I hope you have very nice Scottish Summit event for the rest of the day also. And this session will be uploaded to YouTube after 40 days from now. Thank you all.